Hi there, fellow A-plusers. It's Datila from Rangers of Wrestling bringing you another retro review. This time around, we're going to be reviewing Royal Rumble 1992, and I'm joined by Josh.
Gosh,
How
yep.
are you?
Hello, A-plusers. Again, we're back for another Royal Rumble event, this time 1992. And let's just call it the Not Fair to Flair Rumble. That's what I like to call it. Or Flair's
Oh,
major performance. Let's just call it that.
yeah, that's understandable. No, it totally was not fair to Ric Flair. I mean, homie came out and he was just booed from the get-go.
Yep, number 3. I mean, especially the first time. Well, I guess we probably need to start about the other rest of the matches first before we get to the not fair to Flair Rumble, I guess. But yeah, this was the star making show, I think, for Flair. Again, not that he's not a star already, but in the WWF universe back then, that definitely was something that started.
Yes. Okay, so the first match on the card was a tag team match. It was the New Foundation, Jim the Anvil Neidhart and Owen Hart versus the Orient Express, Kato and Pat Tatanka. So I have to say, how many expresses were there? There was a Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express, and now the Orient Express?
Yeah, something to do with the Expresses. I'm not necessarily sure what all that's about necessarily. What I thought was interesting, though, is actually Pat Tanaka, which again, for the Dallas fans, there was a famous wrestler in the world class wrestling place called Duke Kiyamuka. I remember my grandmother and grandpa always telling me about Duke Kiyamuka. He was one of the evil Asians back then. And apparently I didn't know this, but Pat Tanaka was the son of that legendary Texas wrestler. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Cool, I didn't know that.
Yeah, this match was a fun match. It definitely was. The attire that, again, I think Anvil and Owen Hart had was definitely screamed early 1990s with kind of the bright colors, and made me think of kind of the oh gosh, what was it, Lisa Frank type of decor and stuff like that girls had in school. I mean, it was to me a fun match because it definitely showcased Owen Hart's athleticism with the flips and the dives and stuff like that. And again, you had the Orient Express, who in their own rights really was a pretty unique tag team for the time, especially.
I have to agree with you. I really enjoyed this match from the get-go. This was a fun match. And commentary actually made note of the headbands. They're like, I think the headband's a little too tight, which I thought was so hilarious. You know something? This was actually my first time hearing Bobby the Brain Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon on commentary. This is my first time ever hearing them.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, it
Yeah.
literally, anytime, I'll tell you, anytime you see Bobby Heenan on commentary, it is literally the comedy show. I mean, I know I laughed out loud hundreds of times during this entire event just because of his commentary.
Yeah, he's definitely they were a fantastic duo together. I can see why they're highly regarded as a commentary team.
But the
Really.
only thing I will say about just the Royal Rumble as a whole, and I know this sounds so weird to say, but when you look at the decor, when you look at the voices, it doesn't feel like it's 1992. It
Yeah.
still feels like it was like a 1989, 1988 event. Not again because of the talent, not because of that, but just something about the look did not scream early 1990s WWF at the time. To me, it screamed still a late 88, 89. And again, maybe because, again, we had Bobby Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon. Again, definitely not a bad thing to have for sure. I don't know. It almost felt like it was a back in time Royal Rumble. I guess because it could have been the way they had the ring ropes. I'm not really sure, but it felt different. When I was watching it, I was like, this is 92. Definitely didn't feel like it.
Okay. I see what you mean. I definitely did kind of get that vibe, didn't look like 1992 for sure.
Right.
But
But
I have
we're still in transition too. So that's part of it, I think.
hmm you know, I have to agree with you when you say that this match showcase Owen's athleticism. It really did. And this was actually my first time ever seeing Owen Hart wrestle.
You're kidding. Wow. You got a
Yeah.
lot of first on this one.
Yeah,
Goodness. Oh, man.
I did. I got a lot of first on this pay-per-view because I never seen Owen Hart wrestle before. So I was really impressed by what I saw. I could see why so many wrestlers looked up to Owen Hart.
Oh,
It was
definitely. Not
amazing.
not only just that, but again, I mean, the whole entire Hart family. I mean, this was the
Yeah.
new foundation of Jim Neidhart and Owen Hart. And I mean, I remember correctly, I think Owen Hart and Coco Beware were even a tag team at one time that had the same color scheme. It was horrible, of course, but definitely it was a good combination of Jim Neidhart and Owen Hart because you had the athletic guy and you had the big guy. Really, and the crowd was hot for this one. They were
Yeah.
cheering on in the hot tag at the end when Jim Neidhart came in. I thought, wow, what a way to had the crowd explode. Of course, they ended up winning by pinfall. But I will say one thing that really stuck out to me in this match, and I didn't even see it, was when Fuji put his cane in the corner and then Owen Hart ran into it and cracked it. I thought, wow, holy heck.
Oh, I missed that part. I didn't see
Oh,
this
you
spot.
missed it? Oh, no, you got to go
Yeah.
back and watch it because there's a part where Owen Hart gets thrown into the turnbuckle and Fuji, without anybody noticing, puts this cane right there, and when you hear a big smack, he actually breaks the cane in half.
Oh wait, is that what it was?
It
That's
was a
why it
cane.
sounded
It was
so.
his cane
Oh, when he gets sent into the ring post
turnbuckle.
chest
Right.
first, the
Mm-hmm.
turnbuckle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
That was
I did see
Fuji's.
that spot. Is that what that was?
That was
Okay, I
Fuji's
didn't
cane.
realize. I didn't
Well,
realize he
I,
put his cane on there.
if you watch the replay, I think they had to go and actually show it because I think a lot of people didn't miss it. You really didn't see it. You're like, what is that black thing hanging? And then they showed, oh, look, Mr. Fuji put his cane there. So yeah, it was kind of like a highlight at the end of the match. But no, that was really something that was slick. And I mean, almost too slick. The camera didn't catch it, of course. But definitely it was a great match. And again, I honestly going into it, I don't want to say worried I'd be bored because again, it is Owen Hart. But sometimes those matches can be really either fast paced or plodding depending on kind of how they are. And this one was really good. I was really pleasantly surprised watching this one.
Yeah, me too. I really enjoyed it. It was a great match. Great match to kick off the pay-per-view, if you ask me.
For sure.
So we had 2 interviews, backstage interviews. The first one was with the Mountie, and the second one was with the Hot Rod, Roddy Piper.
So going back to our Royal Rumble 1990, now the Mountie was originally one of the Rougeau brothers. If we go back to that, that's who ended up becoming was the Mountie, the Royal Canadian Mountie Police, basically from Canada. The Mountie's interview was fine. I mean, again, typical heel promo, typical, I'm going to get you. The Mountie always gets his man. That's kind of his tagline back then. With Roddy Piper, again, great. Piper as always. I mean, I will say Piper always tended to kind of blur the lines. My favorite line, I think, of that whole entire thing is, I came to fight here. I don't know about you and what you're planning, but I came here to fight you. So he had really great moments and lines, especially in the middle of that.
One thing I have to say, they kept plugging the fact that the Mountie defeated Bret Hart because Bret Hart had a fever. They kept plugging that. Yeah, they kept saying that throughout the whole night.
And it may have been something I really honestly didn't get to look at the history, but I mean, my imagination, it had to be something because normally you wouldn't see a title change like that go forward. And especially having to set up the match like a day, almost 6 days later, I think. So again, I wasn't sure if that was maybe because they were going to do Bret Hart and Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 8 later that year, or if it was just something to kind of have a transitional champion so they wouldn't have Piper beat Bret Hart that quickly. I really am not sure about that one, honestly. But it was a good interview. I mean, again, definitely got me hyped for it. And Piper's promos are always good, always get you hyped and ready to see him fight somebody.
Yeah. I agree. They were really fun interviews. So this leads into the WTF Intercontinental title match, the Mountie with the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart versus Roddy Piper. So this was actually a pretty decent match. I liked it. And this was actually the shortest match on the card, lasting a little over 5 minutes.
Right. And I think at the time, I think that was kind of the right move because, I mean, you have Mountie, who's a very new character at the time, versus Roddy Piper, the legendary Roddy Piper at that time. Because, I mean, you got to think a couple of years ago, Piper technically retired from the ring at, I think it was 87 at WrestleMania 3 versus Adrian Adonis. So it made sense. I mean, again, it's crazy to think that this entire time Roddy Piper has been in the WWF. That was his first ever title in the WWF. And really, what was it? 16 years later, he ended up winning the tag team titles with Roddy Piper I'm sorry, not 2008, excuse me. 14 years later in 2006 with Ric Flair and Piper beating the Spirit Squad. I mean, so Piper never was WWF champion, not once.
Wow.
He was, I don't even think he was, you know what, I think about it, I don't think he was even WCW champion. He was never a world champion in WCW, WWF, or NWA. Never was. As surprising as that is, he just never was. But this match was good. I mean, it definitely was Roddy Piper just beats the heck out of the Mountie, ends up zapping him at the end. I mean, really, it was a brawl. It definitely felt like a Roddy Piper had an issue with him, and he just beat the heck out of the Mountie, really. I wouldn't say the Mountie really got a lot of offense.
He didn't. The Mountie really didn't get a lot of offense in this. And to add insult to injury, Piper used his own nightstick on him at the end.
It was a zapper or something. Wasn't it a nightstick
zapper?
I don't know what it is.
A zapper or that stick that he carries.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good thing, though. It was a good thing to set up for later on because, again, history being hindsight being 2020, we know that he's going to go and face Bret Hart for the title later on. So I enjoyed the match. Again, I really didn't expect it to be long, and I was kind of glad it wasn't because while the Mountie is a character, and I don't even want to say it's just a Mountie, but sometimes you get characters in the WWF that are great characters, but you don't want to be out there forever. Ultimate Warrior was the same way. Great character, 5-10 minute match were good, but 20, 30, 45 minutes, it loses its luster real quick. And I think the Mountie was.
I didn't see much of the Mountie, so I was happy to see some of the Mountie.
I mean, for example, like the Mountie later on, I believe it was this year, if I remember it correctly. I may be wrong. It was either this year or the prior year at SummerSlam. He had a prison match versus like Big Boss Man. Whoever lost ended up having to spend the night in a New York City jail. And of course,
Oh,
Mountie obviously.
I heard of that. I think that was the
Yeah,
year prior, SummerSlam, wasn't it?
yeah, I believe so. 91, right? And that's kind of the thing is you get those gimmick matches and character matches, and he did great in his role. And again, the Mountie served his purpose. So definitely, I enjoyed this match, even though it was a very short match. It kind of made sense given Piper was way up here in the echelon versus Mountie being like about, I wouldn't even say middle of the card.
And fun fact, this is the only singles match on the card because all the other matches were tag team matches.
Right. And again, I think it was the right move. I think it was something that, where 2 years prior we got Valentine and, Ronnie Garvin, and it was a long match, but I think it was good because it kept the pace going. It was that kind of match to where you expected Piper to win. And again, if Mountie had won, I'd have been shocked. So I was glad Piper won, especially for me as a kid. I enjoyed Piper winning at that point.
Yeah, it was a fun match. All right, so we get a Bushwhackers interview, and they're just basically talking about their match, because this leads into their tag team match, the Beverly Brothers with the Genius versus the Bushwhackers with Jameson. So I've never heard of Jameson. This is actually the first time I ever see Jameson or this character of Jameson. So I was like, what is going on here?
So Jameson, basically, the best way to describe him was a character on the Bobby Heenan show, which the Bobby Heenan show, basically you had WWF superstars, right? So essentially what that was is I believe they took the last half hour to basically have his own little talk show. And Jameson was kind of like his, I dare say, idiot sidekick. But here's the difference with Jameson. Jameson wasn't this sort of crazy character that we see in this match. Jameson was more kind of a straight man, kind of a dorky comedy character, basically somebody that Bobby Heenan could make fun of. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen clips of the Bobby Heenan show.
No.
Again, not PC now, of course, would never air today. But for example, he had 3 heavier set women on there called the Rossetti sisters. And he said, if you're smelling bacon, it's because the lights in here are hot. I mean, all kinds of just terrible, terrible
that
stuff,
wouldn't
right?
fly.
Right. But Jameson was kind of the character he'd make fun of. And of course, now I really honestly, I hate to say this, and I don't mean this the way it maybe comes across, but they kind of basically channeled Eugene. If you remember the Eugene wrestler, to me, it reminded me a lot of Jameson, and Jameson kind of acted like just crazy because he was with the Bushwhackers. So he was kind of a straight-laced guy and then kind of went crazy with Jameson, which is why you hear Bobby Heenan make fun of him in commentary, saying things like, every time he'd come home from school every day, his parents would move away from him.
Yeah,
the
I
reason his
remember
parents
he
never
says
got a
that.
divorce is because they didn't want to take custody of him. It was terrible. But it was
Yeah,
wonderful Bobby Heenan commentary. I was dying laughing the whole entire time. So, I mean,
same.
this match was kind of boring to me.
Yeah.
It felt like 10 minutes too long. I would have expected a 7-minute match, not because they kept taunting and doing the whole this. And after a while, I don't know, it kept plotting to me for a certain point.
I was surprised to see that, like, the first Royal Rumble we did was 1990. This is 2 years later. The Bushwhackers are still over. Everybody loves the Bushwhackers.
Right. Would I let them look at my kid probably at a show? Probably not. But I mean, they have their merit. Don't get me wrong. It's not that I dislike the Bushwhackers. I just felt the match kind of dragged along at a certain point, I guess, because it took them 5 or 10 minutes to get in the ring. And then after that, it was 10 minutes of just, I don't know. I wasn't involved really into the match as much as I expected at first. I guess because it went a lot longer than I expected.
I kind of have to agree with you. I wasn't super into this match. This is also my first time seeing the Beverly Brothers in action. I really wasn't too familiar with their style. But yeah, and we didn't see much of the Bushwhackers in this match either.
No, we really didn't. I mean, again, it was very I don't know. They just played to the crowd a lot, and I was kind of like, okay, come on, let's go, guys. I mean, again, I get that's their characters, right? But if you think about it, they went around for even in the intro with their coming out, they went around the ring a lot, and the Beverly Brothers were kind of waiting on him. And I'm kind of glad. I'm like, good, finally beat them up. Somebody stopped them from doing their whole entire shtick.
Yeah, like yeah. So I tell you for you, this wasn't my favorite match on the card. This could have been a little shorter than it was.
Mercifully, it was over. I mean, again, I understand the whole Genius and Jameson thing, but they really didn't have. I mean, they kept telling the story of the Genius and Jameson are going to fight, and they had that. He kicked him, and that was it. And I don't know. It kind of was just. I expected a lot more manager involvement. Like I expected Jameson to be taunted by the Genius for the Genius to keep interfering, and Jameson maybe not being able to do anything. And finally, he'd had enough, and finally he would fight back. But they had this kind of just real dorky, kept chewing on his tie. I don't know. It didn't grab me like I expected.
Yeah, like I wanted to see more from Jameson and the Genius. Like you're right, they kept on. I wanted to see them, not necessarily throw down, but like do something out there. They were kind of just standing there.
Well, especially at the end when he was kind of doing this and he was doing this number. And I was like, okay, just either hit him or do something because it took too long. I was like, man, he after a while, you think he would escape by then. The Genius would at least ran away or something.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
was glad. I was happy for it to be over. Let's put it that way. I was like, yes, finally, we're good.
Well, okay. So we get a Legion of Doom interview, and again, this is a first of many for me. This is my first time ever seeing Road Warrior Hawk.
Well,
I've seen
yeah.
Road Warrior Animal wrestle,
Mhm.
and I got to experience Road Warrior Animal when he came back to SmackDown a couple years ago.
Right.
But I had never seen Hawk. So it was just magic seeing both of them together.
Yeah. Again, my favorite line of all time of the Road Warriors is nothing but his, well, blah, 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 blah. I mean, again, typical Road Warrior promo. We're going to kick your butt. We're going to be able to hurt you. We're going to mess you up, that sort of thing. So definitely, I loved it. I mean, again, it got me hyped for the match. I'm like, oh, they're going to fight the Natural Disasters. These are two big dudes facing two other big dudes. I mean, again, they always have had that sort of just, I don't know. I don't know if it's the spikes, the face paint, or what, but it's just a magnetic personality that always make you stop and like, who in the heck are those guys?
Yeah, definitely. So this led into a tag team match. It was a Natural Disasters, appropriately named Earthquake and Typhoon,
Right.
versus the Legion of Doom. So I actually I don't know about you, but I really did like this match. Like I said, this is my first time ever seeing a Legion of Doom match together as Warrior and Hawk. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is definitely different. And the difference is that normally with Road Warrior, Hawk, and Animal, they would dominate. You would see them throw guys, you would see them pick guys up and stuff. And this is one of the first matches, I think, that I can remember in a long time that you would see Earthquake and Typhoon pick them up and slam them. Pretty much, I don't want to say dominated the match, but they really kind of held their own a lot more than I expected. And remember, Earthquake being the Canadian Earthquake we saw from the 1990 Rumble with Dino Bravo. That's the same dude.
Yeah.
And again,
I
Typhoon
believe,
being Tugboat.
right? Tugboat. I was shocked to learn that he was Tugboat.
AKA the Shockmaster as well. If you
Oh
know the
yeah.
Shockmaster, that's who that guy is. The same guy.
So there was this one spot where Typhoon gave Hawk a bear hug. I was like, what? Like he
Caught
just
him from
picked
the
him up.
top rope.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, especially for I mean, like I said, you don't see the Road Warriors really be in peril with bigger guys like that. You just don't.
Yeah, you don't. So I was surprised that the Natural Disasters won this, but they won by a count out, which meant that the Legion of Doom,
Right.
kept retain their titles.
It was kind of a cheap ending. I'll be honest with you. I would have much rather had they taken out the Beverly Brothers and the Bushwhackers and just let them have a long 20, 30-minute match. I wouldn't have been upset because, I mean, granted, I know they're kind of slow and plodding, Earthquake and Typhoon, but they don't have to be fast. They don't have to be athletic and agile. They literally can stand there and just be pillars. And the idea is the Legion of Doom could just beat them down. So while I was surprised, and again, we got the subsequent interview after of them being upset about the count out,
And
I
Jimmy
definitely
Hart
thought it was kind of a cheap,
ready.
it was kind of just a cheap ending. I really didn't like it. I was kind of hoping for a return or maybe, I mean, I'm sorry, but I wouldn't have been mad if the Natural Disasters beat the Legion of Doom at that time. And then they have their comeback match at WrestleMania and win the titles back. So I was a little disappointed by the count out.
Yeah, I feel like if something should happen now, and you'd win by a count out like this, especially. It's kind of like, I mean, like, I guess this doesn't. I don't know if this is the same thing, but like, remember when Chad Gable recently beat Gunter by count out? That was great.
Right. Well, there was a reason for that. There was a reason because,
Yeah,
again, granted, now, do I think Chad Gable should have beat Gunther? I thought maybe a week after he beat his historic, beat Honky Tonk Man's historic reign title defense. But I don't know. I mean, again, I just felt like I would have liked to see this for 10 more minutes. Even if they ended in a count out, had a great 25-minute match, it'd been fine. But after
yeah,
10 minutes, I was like, that's it? That's all?
yeah,
It was really
yeah,
weird. It was really this Royal Rumble and a lot of the characters' just actions, and we'll talk about Hulk Hogan later, just were very different. They were very not expected. Let's put it that way. So that was one
yeah,
I didn't expect to count out. I kind of thought they were going to keep going on.
yeah. I feel you. I would have understood a countdown if like the sprawl was like to the outside and it was longer as opposed to how it was a little short for.
Even a double count out. That I would have gone
Yeah,
for that. I'd been like, okay, they hate each other enough. They're going to beat each other up. But the idea that Typhoon just rolled in at 9 and 10, and then the heels are like, well, we should have won the titles. All of them knowing that you don't win the titles that way, it never made sense. That's why I thought, well, why are they complaining? It should technically be the Road Warriors being like, or the Legion of Doom, I should say, going back and saying, we're not done with you guys. Let's have another fight. We're not done fighting yet. I would have much rather had Legion of Doom be mad that they won by count out than the Natural Disasters complaining about winning by count out. It was strange. It was very opposite of what I
yeah,
expected.
yeah, definitely. And like I said, Jimmy Hart threatening to get his lawyer, his attorney.
Right.
Yeah, it was weird. So after this, we get the Royal Rumble match. But before that, we get a bunch of little interviews with all the wrestlers. I
Mhm.
wonder how long that keeps happening. It happened in the 90s Royal Rumble. Now it's happening here. And even Vince McMahon did the intro showing all the participants. So I think that was unique. That I wonder when they put a stop to that. I guess we'll find out as we continue doing these retro reviews.
Right. What was interesting too is there were two interviews that actually did not air live. There was the Coliseum video exclusives, which was with Hulk Hogan, with Lord Alfred Hayes, and then you also had the interview with Ric Flair. At the time, those two, as far as I understand, did not air live on pay-per-view. Those were added after the Royal Rumble came out on video. So during the entire show, as you noticed, Bobby Heenan would say, I need to leave, I need to go get a drink, I'm thirsty, I need to go to the bathroom, whatever, just to be able to go find out Ric Flair's number. And so when he comes out at number 3 in the Rumble later, you hear Bobby Heenan go, oh, no, 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 no. But see, when we watch it, you're thinking, well, surely he watched the interview with Flair saying, I'm number 3. That didn't come out until after the show was in the can and on VHS back in the day.
Oh,
So that was
I
a
didn't
Coliseum
know
video
that.
exclusive. That's why Bobby Heenan, you're like, why was he mad about number 3? He should have known by now. But that's why. So two of those interviews were Coliseum video exclusives.
Nice. I didn't know that. All right. So we also get like a recap of the famous barbershop incident where Shawn Michaels super kicks Marty Jannetty. And Flair actually says that's the bottom line in his promo.
I thought that was interesting. But my
Same.
favorite, I mean, that's one of my favorite, and I wish they would have showed the rest of Heenan's commentary, but on top of the whole Shawn Michaels, oh, I knew he was going to do that. I knew he was going to do that. He don't need Jannetty. There's another line they cut out that says, did you see him? He tried to jump out of the window to get away from Shawn Michaels. They didn't put it in there. And I was like, no, that was the best line of the entire thing. He said, you see Jannetty tried to dive through the window to get away from Shawn Michaels. He don't need him. So they cut that part out. But I mean, I love those old WWF intro videos. You had the Macho Man Randy Savage, Ric Flair laying the seeds. I don't know. Jake Roberts as well. So you really felt like all of them wanted to win. There was never this sort of, I mean, again, granted, when you look back at hindsight being 2020, you realize they're pretty much telling you Flair is going to win the entire thing throughout the whole show. But back then, you would look as a kid and be like, oh, I hope Roddy Piper wins. So whoever your guy would get on there, you would think, oh, man, I hope he does win. So they did a good job making it not so obvious because you had to put your 90s cap on. If not everybody would have known what would have happened back then. There was no internet. So it would just be a guesstimation at that point. There wouldn't be a lot of leaks back then.
Yeah, that's true. Didn't make it too obvious that Flair was going to win. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about this Royal Rumble match, which was actually for the vacant WWF title, which President Jack Tunney came out and he made the announcement that the winner would be declared WWF champion. Do you know the history of that? Why was it?
Yes. So, and I really kind of was surprised they didn't talk about it. They kind of referenced it a little bit, but what happened basically is Survivor Series 1991, a year after The Undertaker debuted in 1990, Ric Flair actually cost Hulk Hogan the WWF title and Undertaker became champion. And I believe that was at Survivor Series 1991. And so how he did it, and again, it was pretty slick how they did it. He went for a tombstone and Flair slid in a chair. So Hogan got tombstone on a chair, pulled the chair out, and basically let Undertaker win the title. Well, of course, Tiny was like, you cheated. You shouldn't be doing that. So they're going to have a rematch at this pay-per-view called This Tuesday in Texas, where Hogan won it again. So it was kind of one of those things they kept fighting back and forth, not trading the title, but I think only once between. But after that, Tony was like, you know what? Let's vacate the title. There's too much controversy. That's why Hogan and Undertaker got later numbers, was to give them a chance to win the title back. Now, I didn't really like that stipulation. I thought that was kind of weird given that it's just title trading, but that was the idea that Tunney basically decided, let's have a Royal Rumble for the title. But it was because of the controversy of Undertaker winning and then Hogan winning it back. Like, I think, I want to say it was probably a month later, maybe less than that. So that's why it was held up in quote-unquote abeyance, if you want to use the buzzword from a couple of years ago.
So this is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it said that this is the last Royal Rumble before the winner gets a title shot, right?
Yeah. Right. Because Yokozuna would go on the following year to win the Royal Rumble, which again was, I'm sorry, I thought it was the stupidest way to win. I guess we can talk about that another time. But
if we do Royal Rumble 93, let us know in the comment section if you want us to do Royal Rumble 93.
Right.
Even though we skipped 91, we'll go in order.
Right, exactly. Right. We'll call it the Royal Rumble podcast, right? And then we'll have different podcast names, right? No. Yeah, but no, this was the last one, yes, because after 1992, 93, it was always the winner of the Rumble would go on to WrestleMania.
All right. So one interesting I noticed is that commentary said that Rick Martel held the long record for the longest Royal Rumble. So I'm assuming this is before
91.
Oh yeah, 91. Okay. And then it said the Bushwhacker Luke had the shortest record. And it's so funny. Bobby Heenan's commentary was like, he got whacked. He whacked it and he got whacked out.
Yeah. I'm telling you, every time Bobby Heenan was on, you couldn't help but laugh. I mean, again, he would, and that's the thing about Bobby Heenan is that people hated him, but you loved his commentary because he was so funny. He would just make just these comments and just kind of just, oh my gosh, I loved it. I mean, again, he was probably the best commentator. I mean, he's really regarded as probably one of the best managers of all time, but also I would say a commentator too.
He definitely was. And like, this is my first time hearing Bobby Heenan on commentary. He was amazing. Made me laugh the whole time.
Yep.
So, like we said earlier, poor Ric Flair, everybody was gunning for him in this Royal Rumble. Every time somebody came out, they always went after him. And like he came out to boos right from the get-go. It's like nobody was cheering for Ric Flair. Everybody was against him. So any particular eliminations that stand out to you?
Yes, Ted DiBiase. That shocked me because again, he was the Iron Man and he got eliminated for my timing. I mean, again, I say my timing. I looked it up. Let's just call it what it is, right? But he was only in there 1 minute and 18 seconds, where 2 years ago, he was in there for 45 something minutes. So he literally was there and gone. I was very surprised he was gone that quickly.
Yeah, right. He was like the first elimination.
Yep. I mean, immediately it was like 1, 2. Oh, there he goes. Yeah, I don't even think he didn't even make it to the 2-minute mark.
No, he didn't. So before I get into what stood out to me, I did also note that but I think it was Bobby Heenan that said numbers 1 through 5 have never made it to the end. So I'm assuming this is before Shawn Michaels enters at number 1 to win the Royal Rumble.
Right. That was in the year, let me think. I want to say it was 95 or 96. But yeah, no, nobody hit it 1 at that point. It was always like number 27, 24, numbers like that. So no, nobody had ever gone. I think Gorilla Monsoon kept saying that throughout the match too, that, Flair's number 1 through 5 and nobody's ever done it. Nobody's ever done it.
My favorite little sequence. Okay, so I have like 2 favorite little sequences. So first of all, you got Repo Man over here eliminating Nikolai Volkov and Greg the Hammer Valentine. Then you got Big Boss Man eliminating Repo Man. And then you got Ric Flair eliminating the British Bulldog and Texas Tornado. He eliminates in the same way. And then HBK and Tito Santana eliminate each other. It's like a very quick and you miss a moment. They're like off to the side. I had to go back and I was like, when did they get eliminated?
Right.
I had to go back and rewind that.
Well, what was interesting about that too is that, you know, you look at Tito Santana and Shawn Michaels, they ended up fighting later on at WrestleMania 8 in a match. So that kind of set that up. And I mean, just the idea that he eliminated Valentine and Texas Tornado at the same time, see the history really behind that. And again, we have to remember, you know, back in the day before there was really cable, you really would only get, like for us, let's say, for example, in Texas, we would get World Class Championship Wrestling and we would probably get WWF and maybe WCW once it came onto the TBS Superstation. So there was a history back back from 1984 between him and the Texas Tornado when they fought for the NWA Championship in Texas way back when. And then Valentine and him had a U.S. title feud. I think it was in the early 80s. So I love that every time somebody became a Flair, there was always some history. There was always some history with most of his opponents, even up to Roddy Piper, same way, Macho Man. So I love that they kind of alluded to it without saying directly, hey, these guys had a feud before. Because really think about it. Valentine is a heel. Why is Valentine attacking Ric Flair? What's the point? Well, if you knew as a fan back then, reading the magazines, that they had a feud from the 80s, you're like, oh, that makes sense why they're fighting each other. Because you noticed throughout the match, I loved how the heels usually would work together and the faces, even though it made no sense, would save each other from elimination.
Yeah, I noticed that. Like the other sequence that I liked was that one sequence where Ric Flair, he's just in there alone after the Barbarian, Hercules, and the Big Boss Man are all eliminated. He's just in there alone, and he kind of like takes a breather, and then Roddy Piper comes out, and they just brought to the outside.
I love it.
That was
I love
cool.
it. And Heenan's commentary says it all. No, 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 oh no. And my favorite sequence on top of that later is when he says, "Thank you, Roddy Piper. Thank you. It's a skirt. It's a kilt, not a skirt. It's a kilt, not a skirt." And then when Piper kicks him, he's like, "You skirt wearing freak. It's a skirt, not a kilt." I mean, you know, I don't know if you caught that sequence when he saved him from the Barbarian, eliminating him.
Oh yeah, I did catch it. That was a really cool sequence.
There's a lot of good sequences in this match. I mean,
Yeah.
definitely there's a lot of little stories, and you could see a lot of the WrestleMania matches kind of being set up later on, even with Jake Roberts and Macho Man Randy Savage. I don't know if you know the story behind why Savage was after Jake the Snake. Do you know? Or
I think it said on commentary that he slapped Miss Elizabeth.
so he slapped Miss Elizabeth, and then when they got married in storyline, when they were having, I think it was their wedding reception, Elizabeth opens a box and a cobra comes out of this, a real live cobra that Jake had upgraded to from his python, or not python, his I think it was python. He moved up to a cobra. And then on a Saturday night's main event, actually, I don't know if you, and I'm surprised they didn't show it. Actually, Jake the Snake Roberts had the cobra bite Randy Savage on the arm. Granted, without the poison, but literally was chewing on his arm. And the story behind that, and which is always a fun story to tell, is that while granted that was part of the sequence, basically Randy Savage said, before this happens, before I allow you to do this, you need to let the snake bite you cold. So he does. So when he goes into the ring for the segment, Jake slaps the crap out of the snake and then turns it on Savage and lets him chew on him for a while. So that's why it's the whole, they'd had a feud up until I think it was this Tuesday in Texas. So that's why it was so heated back then.
So one thing that I was a little confused about in commentary and explaining it was Macho Man actually eliminated Colonel Mustafa and Jake the Snake Roberts. But, and I did put a little asterisk because it stuck out, he went over the rope to attack Jake Roberts, but commentary asked, did Macho Man eliminate himself? And then you had this weird spot where Undertaker goes to the outside and he throws Macho Man back in.
Right.
And commentary says that no, Savage was not eliminated because no one threw him over the rope. And one of the rules is that somebody has to throw you out. So right. I thought that part was a little confusing because nowadays you got guys that do cross bodies off like the top turnbuckle and they're eliminated. So what was up with that?
I think it's probably one of those things that I think Savage got excited, wasn't thinking about it because he was apt. That was usually his thing. He would jump over the top rope and attack, and I think they had to kind of hide it and basically say, get him back in there, get him back in there. So I think it was just Randy Savage got real hyped up and ready to go and intense. He was an intense guy, apparently, in real life.
Botched. It was a botch.
I think it was a botch. I think they had to really, because think about it, there'd be no sense for Undertaker to go attack him. Granted, there was a story between all of them because Jake the Snake Roberts and Taker were linked. And what happened later on with Elizabeth, which is funny, is later on, Jake was going to hit what he thought was Savage coming from the back, but Elizabeth was going to end up getting hit. So Taker stopped him, and that's how they started their feud for WrestleMania 8. So there's a lot of history there, but I think it was a botch they had to on the fly fix.
Yeah, because I thought it was strange that Undertaker went out there to toss him back in, and I'm like, I was looking at it, I was like, what? That's a rule? Like, okay.
Right. Well, you notice Savage rolls back out and attacks him. He's like, get in there. So you could tell he's almost like, get back in there, you idiot. So, yeah, I think that was a botch twice. And I think Savage didn't realize that, oh, I'm supposed to get back in there.
Yeah. That was definitely strange. But they did a really good job trying to hide it.
They really did.
So Hulk Hogan ended up eliminating the Undertaker with a clothesline.
That was a surprise. But then again, only Hulk Hogan could be the only one to eliminate the Undertaker at that time because he was so over and just such a giant thing. What's crazy, if you think about it, is Taker only had one elimination, eliminating Jimmy Snuka after like just one swipe, basically. And usually Taker is always known for eliminating everybody, right? That's usually kind of the big thing. But actually, the one who had the most eliminations was Sid Justice.
How many did he eliminate?
6.
Oh, okay.
Before Kane being with 4.
Before Kane came in years later with 13 eliminations.
Right, and I think, who was it that broke that record? Was it Roman that broke the record of eliminations?
I believe it was Roman. I think it was Roman.
Of course it was. It had to be. That's when, yeah, right, because I think that was the year that maybe I think he got booed with The Rock raising his hand. I don't remember, but I think that was it. The poor mayor of Knox County. Poor guy. Can't catch a break.
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing with like Sid Justice. So he eliminated Roddy Piper and Rick Martel, who held the record. And him and Ric Flair eliminated Macho Man. But when it comes to eliminating Hogan, like, he tried to, but he couldn't. And Hogan actually was grabbing his arm, and that's the reason Ric Flair won, because Hulk Hogan was grabbing Justice's arm, and Ric Flair just tossed Sid Justice over.
I hated that thing because really he eliminated him, which, I mean, made sense. That's what you're supposed to do, is eliminate somebody. But to me, like, they kind of acted like Sid Justice was the jerk, and I was like, no, Hogan technically cost him the match. Technically, Hogan's the heel at this point. And so I really was kind of surprised that I don't know, it was a very mixed message. And you saw some of the crowd chanting, Sid, 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 and he kind of points to him being like, look, they care about me winning. So, I mean, as strange as it is to see Sid Justice as a babyface, I mean, really, apparently, he was deemed the heir apparent to basically take Hulk Hogan's boots and become like the number one babyface, but told Vince, I don't want to do that. I'd rather be a heel my entire career. And so we could have had Sid Justice end up being the new Hulk Hogan, but he refused. And history played out as it did.
He and Hogan were in the ring, and then like officials had to come and separate them.
Right. One thing I didn't really like is I didn't like that they had Flair basically be chased off by Hulk Hogan and had the Hogan and Sid thing. I'm like, the dude just won the WWF title for the first time. Granted, he had his moment at the end, but I still did not expect him to kind of run from Hulk Hogan that quickly, especially showing in the match how he was after everybody.
Yeah, I didn't like that. I was like, why is he running away? Like, he just won. Like, what kind of message are you trying to send here?
Well, what I would have thought is, I mean, to make it better, it should have been Jack Tunney goes in there, gives him the belt, and then when Hogan comes after him, then you see him clutching the title, kind of backing off like, aha, I got it. And then you could have the interview of him walking in, Mean Gene, instead of the whole, here's Ric Flair and here's the championship. I don't know. It was strange. It was strange to have a backstage segment awarding him the title. I thought that was very strange.
Yeah. And basically, like, you had this segment with Ric Flair and Sid Justice in the ring, and then you end the pay-per-view with the Ric Flair interview.
It's very different. I mean, a great promo. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, with a tear in my eye. I mean, that is a classic, iconic moment.
Tear in my eye.
Yeah, I mean, and again, woo. I mean, again, I love Bobby Heenan. Of course, he's a character, and him and Perfect laughing in the background. It was a great combination. What's even crazier, if you think about it, though, is not a year later, it was actually Perfect and Flair on I think it was the second Raw or the first Raw. I want to say it's the first Raw, that they had a loser leaves the WWF match, and that's when Flair went back to WCW because Perfect beat him on the first Raw. So it was a year
Okay.
later, Flair was gone, which is crazy to think of, given he had just won the title.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Didn't he, and it didn't even make it to the next Royal Rumble. I think he lost the title to Bret Hart in like October of that same year of '92. So it's crazy just to think about like how everything changed.
Yeah, that is crazy.
But did you notice the final four were the two main events of WrestleMania?
The Hogan, Flair, Justice, and Savage. What was the WrestleMania main event of that year?
So the main event of that year was actually Savage and Flair, and then you had the Kill main event, which actually ended up being the main event of Hogan and Justice, and Warrior returned at the end. The Ultimate Warrior came back.
Oh, okay.
But what was crazy is you would think it had been Hogan and Flair because they were the top two, you know, wrestlers of their company. Apparently, what happened is in December at a house show, they had some matches that were deemed boring, and they changed the whole WrestleMania plans because of it.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that's it for the review. What did you think of this pay per view overall?
I thought it was good. I mean, again, besides I would have taken out the Bushwhacker match, I thought it was a solid card. I mean, we had a pretty good match. The Mountie match didn't overstay its welcome. The Natural Disasters League of Doom, I thought could have been longer. Really, I think had they taken out Bushwhackers and the Beverly Brothers, I thought it was a solid pay per view. The Royal Rumble was good. I mean, you think about when you look at all the Hall of Famers that are in the Royal Rumble. Like you have Flair, Hogan, Sid Justice isn't in yet, but I'm sure he eventually will be. You have Piper. You've got pretty much all the people you're missing is Dusty Rhodes. I mean, who else is in there that's not in there that you can think of? Bret Hart, maybe, I guess. But it was a star-studded Rumble. It really was. Besides the
No,
weird
Bret Hart.
Warlord and Berserker. No, remember
Bret
because he
Hart.
had that fever, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. I thought you meant the Hall of Fame. I was like, Bret Hart's in the Hall of
No.
Fame.
I'm sorry. No. I'm just saying that besides like Bret Hart and maybe a couple others, this was a very star-studded Rumble, especially at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they said best commentary. We got Savage still to come. We've got Sergeant Slaughter, and I thought, dang, that's a lot of names that you had at the end. So they did a really good job of. I felt like where 1990 tended to drag. I think this one never dragged during the Royal Rumble match. I felt like there was always anticipation who's coming out next, and even if it was somebody I didn't care about, there was still the story, and Heenan really kept the story going with, oh my gosh, it's Virgil, get off of Flair, leave him alone. So really, Bobby Heenan carried the entire Rumble, really.
Yeah. For me, I thought this was a solid pay per view. Like you said, I wasn't a huge fan of the Bushwhackers versus the Beverly Brothers. You could have cut that out or made it shorter and made the Natural Disasters versus the Legion of Doom a little longer. But overall, I thought this was just really still solid pay per view, and I really like the Royal Rumble.
It was better. I think it was a
Yeah,
better Rumble than 1990. To me, 1990 was okay because, I mean, I hate to say that Royal Rumble 1990 was hard to get through because it wasn't, but it definitely, I think you could tell, especially from this pay per view, as I mentioned earlier, that WWE was definitely in a transition mode, and you could tell they really weren't sure how to transition out of that 80s type of just look to a newer look. I think a year later, in 93, I think it started to change with Razor Ramon and all the colors and all that sort of stuff. And maybe we'll do that next. Who knows? But again, comment if you want us to do 93 or just go in order because, I mean, we don't mind doing that either.
we're gonna go back to 91 to 91 if we go in order.
I don't know. I mean, again, if it was up to me, I would love to do a review of 1999. That's always a fun one to watch.
1999. Okay, yeah. I don't remember that one because I don't think I even was able to watch pay per views back then. You had to pay for each pay per view back then. So
Yeah. I mean, I definitely like this Rumble a lot better. I thought this was a lot better put together Rumble, and again, it never dragged. I never, except for the Beverly's match. Beyond that, I was thoroughly entertained. More than 1990 was kind of hard to get through.
one thing that I wish that they should have ended, it was like I just didn't like the fact that it ended with the Ric Flair interview. I felt like that was like, okay, you had this really cool segment. Why are you adding this in?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that would have made for a much stronger finish if you would have just ended with the Sid and Hulk Hogan stuff in the ring.
Right. And I think really they only ended because, again, I think they were like, well, crap, he's WWF champion. We got to do something. But again, I think they could have done the promo and then had it to where Hogan comes in and then Sid, they get in their faces and Flair just kind of backs out. Then you could still have that same entire promo, same everything, except they would back off and you would have it to where, let's say Hogan and Justice were at each other's throats, and here's Flair holding the title. If you remember, like when CM Punk basically, I think in one of his when he was WWE champion way back when, he was holding his title, backing away in the crowd. I kind of thought they could have done the same thing with Flair, and it would have been like, holy crap, is it going to be Hogan or is it going to be Sid Justice fighting Flair? Because now Flair's scared of who's going to come take his title at WrestleMania. So,
yeah, I definitely agree. All right. Well, that's it for this paper. Let us know here, guys. If you guys have seen Royal Rumble 92, let us know what you guys thought of Royal Rumble 92. What was your favorite match that we discussed? And also to comment, let us know what other retro review you guys want us to do. Should we go in order?
Right. Should we go in order?
I would thank you guys all so much for watching and for the continued support. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Make sure you hit that bell so you get notified whenever A Plus Hero Report goes live or whenever they release new content.
All right.
Bye.
See you next week. Bye, y'all.